Begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Infrastructure Committee meeting of 15 March. I declare this meeting open at 10:03 a.m. I would like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. I remind attendees to take necessary safety precautions. Do any councillors have a leave of absence to declare? We're all here, so there being none, that's fine. I'll begin today by referring to the late report item 6.1 and note that the item is a deputation that is being presented by the Department of Transport and Main Roads. Can the Road and Infrastructure Planning Manager, Mr Kamal Ranawira, please enter discussions? But before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I note that item 6.1 is confidential. I note that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session to allow for productive and confidential discussion regarding the Logan and Gold Coast Faster Rail project. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item, and if applicable, provide an overview of your intended discussions if it's different to the prepared motion? Councillor Murphy is ready to move us into confidential. We don't need a seconder for that? Yes. We do need a seconder. Councillor Karansky, thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Councillors Hall and Bannon. Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Bannon? Thank you very much. That being said, the Fours won the day, so where am I up to? I have no idea. Okay, the meeting is now closed to the public. Please be advised that the meeting is now in confidential session and therefore the recording of this meeting will be suspended until it reopens. Good to go. Thank you, councillors. I understand that there's a closed motion on the screen. We'll give you time to read that. Is that the whole of the motion? Okay, do I have a mover for the motion, please? Oh, hang on. Oh. A confidential deputation presentation has been presented to the meeting and therefore is required to be tabled to the meeting. As is a procedural motion, I now call for someone to move the motion as displayed on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Bradley, seconded Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with all councillors present for the vote. I now call for someone to move the report's motion as displayed on the screen. Councillor Wilcox is moving the motion. Do I have a seconder? Mr Mayor, thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Still reading, Councillor Raven? No, that's no worries. Thank you very much. I note that, Mr Mayor, did you vote in that? You did. Councillor Raven, how did you vote?
Against.
Councillor Bannon? It says on the script that we do. What did he say?
Take away.
I assume that.
Four. Okay, thank you very much. Was there anyone else who did not raise their hand in support of that motion? Sorry. Thank you very much. The motion has been carried. I'll now move on to item 4.1, which heavy usage and road safety on Plunkett Road at Tamborine. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to Mr Ranawira to open public discussion. Mr Ranawira, you may proceed.
Thank you. This report is written to address the previous resolution, which is also indicated in the report, and the road safety concerns afterwards on Plunkett Road. I take the report is read. However, I like to provide a brief summary. The previous resolution, which was in the report, is request to address the heavy vehicle usage, designated road hierarchy and future planning of Plunkett Road. However, there were concerns raised after that about traffic safety as well. So the report addresses the following: road hierarchy, heavy vehicle usage, future planning, customer inquiries, road safety audit, speed limit review. So the first one is, if I go briefly with every item, road hierarchy. Plunkett Road is a future rural road, rural arterial road, which need to connect to south of Yarrabilba PDA. It will be considered as a two-lane rural arterial in most part of this road, but there is a section that goes into four lanes as well. It needs to carry its share of heavy vehicle traffic as well. About the number of heavy vehicles traveling on the road, surveys carried out in 2018 and 20 show that less than 12% of the vehicles are heavy vehicles. This is not excessive, but it's getting there. In terms of future planning, the road upgrade is listed in our major roads, capacity, safety, SOI, and sub-regional infrastructure plan between EDQ and Council. However, the delivery timeline is subject to the availability of funding. With regard to customer inquiries, we have received 27 inquiries, mostly about general traffic safety and speeding, and it's listed in the report. As a result of all these things, road safety audit was carried out, engaging external consultant called Bitsios. The final report is attached. In table 3 of the report, which is in page number 8, provides a summary of those proposed actions. It is now important to prioritize those actions and find the feasible remedial actions and deliver them. on top of that, we have done a speed limit review as well. The proposal, I think is drafted. It is going to the next Speed Management Advisory Committee for ratifying it to reduce the speed. So that's all the actions that we have taken so far. So all those recommendations are in the report as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Ranawira. When you say that's all we've taken so far, that's pretty cool. Councillor Karansky, I'm sure you have some questions.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the council officers for their diligence in working behind the scenes to bring this report back to council. There is, as you rightly say, a tremendous amount of work that went into this particular report. That being said, I welcome the findings of the report. I believe that it's now back with us to determine how we're going to move forward with the report and what actions we're actually going to undertake as a council. I know that a number of residents are eagerly awaiting that information coming back. But my question is on the speed limit review. The next steps that are happening now is it's actually going to another review process. I wonder if you could elaborate on that for councillors, please.
Next step is it's going to the Speed Management Committee, SMAC, I think, in April. And usually the recommendations that we put up will be ratified. And in this case, there are a lot of merits to ratify that. So that's probably what's going to happen. After ratifying that, we have to implement that.
So if I could please request that that information is made available to me as soon as we find out the outcome of that. I know I have a lot of eager residents who are waiting to hear the outcomes. I know we talked about the strip and the agreement also with the PDA areas and so on, and the future upgrades of this road. From what I understand, council isn't looking at any major upgrade in the short term. So I'll certainly be looking to champion some of the findings that have come out of this report to stabilise what we have there in the existing. I'm very grateful that we have a little bit of a checklist where the investigating officers have actually gone down item by item. They've taken all of the residents' concerns, investigated each one of them, and come back with their consideration of those issues. It's interesting when you look at page 38, and we can actually see some, I think there's about 30 items on that list, and by and large they actually traverse the entirety of Plunkett Road. So I think that's an interesting point in and of itself. We're not concentrated in one area, but we've got issues that are actually right across the region. Madam Chair, really that was more statements and questions today because the officers have been good enough to answer my questions offline. And it's my intention now to work through these one at a time and to see what we can actually implement as a council. I do think that it's somewhat disappointing that as an area councillor, a lot of the Division 4 local infrastructure program budget will actually have to go toward improving this section of road because there isn't another funding source that I'm aware of other than grant funding.
Sure.
And I think that that's a substandard section of road and the report supports that. Nonetheless, it is what it is. I'll speak to this further in Ordinary Council next week.
Mr. Ranawira, would you like to respond?
I think that currently the funding is, as you said, the divisional funding, but I think we could make an application for black spot funding as well. So that is a possibility. There is no guarantee, but it is a possibility as well.
I certainly welcome any grant funding you might be able to find, Mr. Ranawira, but my understanding is that this is a very protracted process to attract grant funding for black spot programs, and as you'd recall, I've been banging on about this for about 4 years now.
I think with the federal election coming up, having it listed might give it a bit more. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Thank you for the report coming back. I'm just curious to note, I'm along the same lines with Bushman Drive at the moment, but Bushman Drive was also flagged for an upgrade last year, but it still hasn't happened. So just wondering if we have an update on when Bushman Drive will be having its upgrade.
Do you want to raise that in general business, councillor Wilcox? 'Cause
Sure
this is
can.
actually about Plunkett
Sure
Road, so we're
can.
going
I
to stick
didn't
to
think
the
of
subject. If there's no other councillors that have a question, councillor Kerensky, would you like to move the motion on the screen?
I would.
Do I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Bannon, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with everybody present. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for that. We'll move to item 4.2, which is a permanent road closure application for Buttercup Close. Before we start, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to Mr Ranawira to open public discussion. Mr Ranawira, you may proceed.
Very briefly, Department of Natural Resources is seeking council's feedback to close part of Buttercup Close in Meadowbrook. The best way to describe this is going to the page number 23. The shaded area of the Buttercup Close is proposed to be closed. And as all properties accessing from that part are in single ownership. That's the crux of the matter. And the application has gone to the Department of Natural Resources. They are asking council's feedback. We have carried out internal consultation, including our councillor Hall, Division 6 councillor. The recommendation is outlined. In fact, it states, subject to the conditions as outlined, council has no objections to the closure.
Thanks very much. Councillor Bannon, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, through the chair. Just out of curiosity, so we close that off. Does that become a road reserve, or does that backyards get bigger? Like what happens with the space at the end of the cul-de-sac?
When you close that road, they can purchase that.
Yeah.
So that's probably what's going to happen.
So they'll just purchase it, move the boundary back out.
All land is theirs.
Yeah. That's all.
There being, councillor Hall, did you have a question?
Yeah, like they own all the properties there, so I'm supportive of the closure. It's like a new driveway now.
Thanks very much. With no other councillors having a question, councillor Hall, do you want to move the motion? Thank you. Your seconder, councillor Raven. All those in favour of the motion on the screen, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously with all councillors present. Next up is item 4.3, the road safety strategy for Logan 2022 to 2026. Before we commence discussion, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to Mr Ranawira to open public discussion. Mr Ranawira, you may proceed.
I think there is a presentation for this. Without further delay, I hand over to Carl to start the presentation. The road safety strategy is the current strategy going next 5 years. We have had strategies in the past, and the best thing about the strategy is having that coordination or the partnership with the TMR, police, and RACQ, that partnership, and a few others as well. That partnership is the crux of the matter for this road safety strategy. That's most important thing is that partnership. I mean, we can find problems in road safety by having those discussions going on, ongoing discussions with the police, the TMR, and others. So I think Carl will outline the.
Through the chair, the best way to explain the road safety strategy is just to give a quick summary of the history of the road safety strategy, and where we're going, where we're proposing to go from here on. So the roads. Is this scrolling down? No. I think it's just on scroll. Okay, we'll go to the first page. So so we commenced the Safe Roads for Logan road safety strategy. Our first one was in 2010. It was for 3 years. We subsequently went to a second strategy after reviewing that first strategy in 2013, and our previous road safety strategy ran from 2017 to 2021. It was 5 years. So we're now in a position where our current road safety strategy has come to the end of its term last year, and we're moving into our next road safety strategy. It's important to recognise all our road safety partners who've come along the ride with us. Our partners, police, Queensland Government, in terms of TMR, RACQ, Transurban, who manage all the leased motorways, and Queensland Health as well. Very important, Queensland Health providing statistical data that comes into the hospitals that we don't necessarily see through crash data, and also running their own strategies like to address drink driving and things like that. Our minor stakeholders, KidSafe, who look at child restraints, and also RIDER, which is the Rotary Youth Driver Awareness Program, and they run in the years 10 and 11 in the schools. So if we move on. So this provides a bit of a timeline. The report, the presentation that you see in your actual in your reports is showing the actual diagram, the numbers there under strategy 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's come up a bit pixelated, but anyway, before we commenced the road safety strategies, we had a time where we just basically had committees in council, which was the Traffic and Transport Advisory Committee, TTAC. It ran up to 2009 when it was changed to the Road Safety Advisory Committee, and we commenced our first road safety strategy in 2010 to 2012. And over that time, we ran the Road Safety Advisory Committee, and then that became the Road Safety and Bicycle Advisory Committee. Actually, those committees were actually disbanded in 2016 by resolution of council as new committee structures were formed. So in that period, near where the blue arrow and the red arrow come together on the top there, the advisory committees were actually disbanded, and we're actually looking now in future reports to propose possibly reforming some of those committees. But that's not the purpose of this report. So we're now moving into our fourth road safety strategy for 2022 and 2026. So if you move down to the next slide. So the original strategy and the subsequent strategies have focused on a number of things based on recorded data, and that focused around the areas of road safety coordination, speeding, impaired driving, driver distraction restraints, obeying traffic signals, signs and road rules, pedestrian safety, school environment, motorcycle safety, and cycling safety. So they've been the core elements of our previous road safety strategies. During that time, we've also received a number of awards for some of the initiatives that have come through the road safety strategies. The RU 1 metre campaign received commendations in the Australian Road Safety Foundation Awards, and also through Council's Innovation Awards, received a commendation. We've got Patrick the Pace Car, which most people would be familiar with, that drives around that has in the past driven around the schools during critical times, around the school zone times, to try to encourage people to go at the correct speed of 40 k's. It's all badged up and indicating what they should be doing. That's received a number of awards as well, including winning the 2016 Cars Q Award for road safety, and other innovation awards in council again. More recently, we've received awards for the Stinger project in coordination with the police. I don't know if you're aware of the Stinger project at all, but the police came up with an initiative to try to stem or capture hoons out on the road, or those who have stolen vehicles or whatever. They actually have marked out locations on the road where the police can safely put out their stingers, the spikes on the road. They roll them out at these set locations, and as people find, as they become aware of the the culprits and their location, the police can identify the nearest location for trying to set up those stingers in a safe way. So that's received an award for a number of, through the Road Safety Foundation and Queensland Road Safety Awards. So if we can move on to the next slide. Some of the current road safety programs that we have run and we'll plan to continue to run include expos at shopping centres such as Grand Plaza. It's been a key location, as well as the Hyperdome. We've also been in Beenleigh at one stage, I think. There's the Multicultural Driver Learner Program, and there's a number of other initiatives through the police and TMR, including motorcycle safety campaigns. There's an initiative from the police, 2-and-2 driver distraction demos, where it encourages people to keep 2 hands on the wheels, two eyes on the road. And they actually have a simulator that you can drive, and it tells you, it kind of gives you an indication as to what happens if you're actually distracted. So they've been going around to the expos and different places. And you can see up there, I mentioned before, Queensland Health involved in initiatives such as soft drinks on the house for designated drivers. So I'm not sure if that's still running. I think it is, but they roll it out in different locations at different times. So we'll move on. So that's where we're at. It's a unique partnership with the police, TMR, and all our other road safety partners. It's seen as a leader around Queensland for its safety program and initiatives. It has a weekly meeting between Queensland Transport, TMR, and the police and ourselves to coordinate operational issues. And however, we've focused on data in the past. We're actually looking to actually move more strategically in a more practical way to incorporate some of our business operations into the road safety strategy as well. And we'll be focusing on a few key areas, which I'll summarise below. Just on the right there is just some technical presentations we plan to provide to upcoming different conferences. So we'll scroll down. So the new strategy, 2022 to 2026, has a slightly different aim. While we're going to be focusing on those actions on the right-hand side that have come up through the past strategies, we're going to break them up a little bit differently and focus on these key areas of education, encouragement, advocacy, crash investigation prevention, pedestrian enabling facilities, on and off-road cycling facilities, speed management measures. We're going to focus on engineering treatments and also have more focused reporting as well. Hopefully on an annual basis. So the key difference is we're going to become a bit more strategic in those areas rather than just going along as business as usual. So just to highlight what we have achieved in the past as well, we set out with the road safety strategy aiming to have a 10% reduction in fatal crashes and serious injuries. That started off really well to start with in the first couple of years. Actually, we achieved a 4% reduction in the first strategy, 7% reduction again in the second strategy. But unfortunately, the more we reduce it, the more likely we can't maintain that reduction. So unfortunately, in the strategy 3, we actually went up by about 13%, and the current strategy, due to different elements, is a little bit higher than we'd liked at the moment. But a lot of those are actually due to motorcycle incidents, which we're trying to focus on and address through our current strategy, our new strategy. So we've gone away from a specific 10% reduction, but we are still aiming to have a reduction in fatal crashes and serious injuries. So our aim, while not specifically 10%, is still to reduce it overall in coming years. That's just a quick summary of where we've been, where we're going. The report spells it out probably a bit more succinctly. We've got a little bit of work to do just to tidy up the actual road safety strategy in a form that's presentable in a hard copy as well as electronic copy, and we hope to launch it to coincide with National Road Safety Week in May this year. I'm happy to take any comments now.
Thanks very much for that presentation, and I must say after reading it, it made me reconsider whether or not I wanted to buy a 50cc little moped and put that under pressure on local roads. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Carl. The presentation was much more informative than the report. I really struggled with the report because there's lots of stuff that speaks about significant positive road safety impacts, but not heaps of measurables. The only measurable that you've got is the 10% marker, which will only get harder and harder to achieve, not just because if you get a reduction, there's less crashes to reduce, but we've got an increasing population rapidly, so you're going to get more accidents. It seems that I would rather understand what you're doing with if you go back to the Prezzo, the things that you've got coming up with your education. How many people have you educated? What are you doing with CSAC to actually educate people who are committing the offences rather than just trying to educate everybody when the people who are committing offences aren't actually the ones that are going to receive the education? If the best bit is collaboration, and to be honest with you, I know that council loves strategies, but almost everything you've got in this report looks like, feels like, and should be business as usual. Like collaborating with other levels of government, every single branch that can does, and I would have thought that a strategy is more around what we're doing, because obviously you're going to collaborate, and how we're demonstrating what we're going to do to support those in a meaningful way. Like you've identified 6 priorities, but how are you going to measure improvement in those priorities over the next 5 years, so that when we come back in 5 years' time and we look at this strategy, you can actually say to us, councillors, we said we would educate people, this is how many we've educated. We said that we would improve pedestrian activity. Like a great one would be, how much additional funding have you secured in the last 5 years that wasn't already allocated to LCC?
Carl, would you like to answer the numerous questions that councillors put to you, if that's okay?
I've got more, Madam Chair. No, you keep, yeah.
Yep, happy to respond to the first question. Yes, statistics are great, and yes, we will be. The last action plan in the strategy is to actually provide reporting on the strategy. So we will be including statistics in that. I think while our the review of our previous strategy did not enter into the specifics of how many people, it did actually highlight the outcomes of our public consultations and our campaigns. I guess we'll try to focus on how many people may be in attendance in those various campaigns. Yeah, I guess we'll try to. We will take that on board and try to put some numbers to it, as well as look at part of the engineering part of it is to look at the statistics and see where we can actually reduce fatalities and things like that, in terms of possibly delaying left turn on red systems. Like it is business as usual, but we'll be making a concerted effort to actually identify those locations more proactively. So.
Councillor Raven, can you ask one question at a time and then allow the officer to answer, if that's okay?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can. So I guess when looking at what you've laid out, you've broken my train of thought, Madam Chair. Give me a second to regather it while I waffle for a moment. You're very good at it. So the councils, as the local government, council's key role in road safety is designing safe roads. So when I see something like Plunkett Road, which has been a dangerous road for a very long time, and where they're running education programs instead of planning for safer roads, like I would have thought safer roads for Logan would be from the RIP branch, road infrastructure planning, would be planning to make our roads safer in their construction and design as our primary mechanism for improving safety on the road. So I guess my question is, why doesn't the the strategy, which is meant to be more strategic, focus on achieving more funding so that you can deliver better road outcomes in places where you don't have funding now, rather than focusing on education and trials on Hold the Red when Hold the Red's already being used.
Happy to respond to that, Madam Chair. I guess one element is the engineering side of the things. The other element is driver behaviour. And so the road safety strategy has had a key focus on trying to change driver behaviour, because it doesn't matter how many safe systems you put in place, if the drivers don't drive to the conditions or to the way the road's meant to be driven to, then it doesn't matter how safe you have it, there's going to be incidents and accidents and crashes. And so the road safety strategy, as I said, has got a number of elements in there that do focus on engineering, attracting additional funding. There is road safety, there's black spot funding. There is a limited amount of funding we can attract, and we will be doing that as part of our business as usual. And I guess through the engineering tasks within the road safety strategy, we'll be applying more for those areas of funding. So we can't create more funding, but we can certainly go out and identify the available funding to apply for. Yep.
Last question with your indulgence, Madam Chair. So if the key goal of the strategy, and I just think the strategy is business as usual, because you're doing great stuff. I just don't think you need a strategy to do it, because you're already doing it day in, day out for the last 12 years. But if the key goal of the strategy is to change driver behaviour, and if you or I could get people to drive safely, we'd go into business, we'd be millionaires. But can you demonstrate how you've improved driver behaviour? Like, can you measure that? Can you show? That's what I would like to see. If you're going to have a strategy that's focused around collaboration and driver behaviour, can you demonstrate, or will you demonstrate with this strategy at the end of the cycle, what you did to change that and how you can measure that, so I can explain to ratepayers why we're putting resources into it and why it's beneficial to them?
I guess the strategy is an overarching document that guides our business, and there isn't an awful lot of money that council does actually put into it. It does guide our business as usual, as you say. One of the areas, an example of an area where we do hope to provide statistical evidence of reducing those fatalities, is in the motorcycle area. And so, working in partnership with Main Roads and police, we're trying to crack down and focus on that particular group of drivers or riders to try to change their behaviour and increase awareness. It seems to have been a trend over the last 5 years or so, the increase in motorcycle fatalities, and unfortunately it just seems to be going up. So I guess the strategy provides a forum for a think tank of like-minded professionals from different areas, not just council, but to work in collaboration with the police and TMR and those other road safety partners to try to come up with innovative ways to encourage better driver behaviour, but also identify other initiatives we can possibly take to try to stem the increase in fatalities. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So road safety is something that I'm sure all councillors hear about from their residents all the time, and that's why I want to be able to point to numbers, evidence, demonstrate what council is doing. So I get asked regularly, what's council doing about this? And just speed bumps isn't cutting it anymore and won't. So it'd be great to be able to point to it. I look forward to that information being updated each year as we go. Thank you.
Great questions, Councillor Raven. Councillor Jeremiah?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When it comes to motorcycle incidents and accidents, a lot of it's due to the culture, and government's good at a lot of things. Government's good at borrowing money, government's good at spending money, government's good at writing strategies and writing PowerPoints, but government's not great at changing culture. So I think remembering our strengths as a government and also our weaknesses as a government is important. Something that I would really value is the PowerPoint was provided a number of days ago. I had a read of it last night, and I think having less PowerPoints read out during committee and hearing more about the council officer's unique perspective and experience regarding this would be beneficial to me, because I already read the PowerPoint and I don't think it's necessary to have it read out. On page 42 of this attachment, it talks about action plan reporting, and item A25 says that council will trial new technologies to see what makes a difference. Could you please let us know if there's any technologies in the pipeline and what those technologies are expected to be? Thank you.
There's new technologies that are coming on board all the time. There's Bluetooth technology that can track vehicles just by their, what do you call it, the code on their phone as they go past the detectors in signals. The MAC address. Yep. So that we can use that for identifying travel time data as well. But these technologies are developing all the time. As you would have seen with even traffic counters, they've gone away from manual counting to actually videoing the intersections and then they go off and get counted either automatically by the video technology or by people sitting in a back room afterwards to manually check it. But the technology is changing. I believe even with intersection counts, they can start tracking speeds as well through the intersection, which is something I didn't know until recently. So there are different ways of measuring data, and the technology is changing all the time. So I guess the idea of this is to trial things that come along. This is a 5-year strategy. So while the technology may not be here today, it may emerge tomorrow, and we're certainly keen to grab hold of those new technologies and try them out as they emerge. So,
thank you.
Councillor Bannon, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we say more motorbikes are having crashes, how much goes into the fact that there is more motorbikes on the road? Do we look at that? Because obviously you need a home loan to buy fuel for your car, so there's a lot more motorbikes on the road. So when we see more vehicles having accidents and more bikes, how do you take into account how many more how many bikes are on the road compared to last year?
My understanding is that statistically there is a disproportionate number of motorcycle accidents compared to other vehicle accidents. So while yes, motorcycle numbers may be increasing, I don't know whether there's actually evidence to show that that is the case. I think the proportions may still be the same, but the proportions of incidents due to motorcycle the number of fatalities due to motorcycle incidents is actually going up. Last year, 60% of fatalities were motorcycle accidents. So, the data speaks for, actually 100% of this year's fatalities, I think, are motorcycle incidents. So,
Motorbike, obviously, 2 crashes, one falling off the bike and then hit something. So it's always going to be that way.
Yeah, it's breakable stuff
Thank you,
on the
my
bike. Just before we proceed with any other questions, I think the question around reading of reports, the Infrastructure Committee presenters have always been very conscious that sometimes their presentations can seem quite long and no one wants them read to them after they've read them already. I think if there is a genuine feeling around that you don't want things read to you in committee, please let me know prior to, and I'll be more than happy to speak to the officers. But I think one of the things and the reasons why they do read it, particularly with something as important as a road safety strategy, is that sometimes it can trigger questions in people, and we've seen that here today. So I think in some instances it does have value, but if you prefer for that not to happen in the future, please let me know. Councillor Raven?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Councillor Amar, I don't support the verbatim reading out of presentations, but what Carl presented actually told me a whole bunch of things that weren't in the report. I had no idea what 2 and 2 was. You explained it to me, so there was a lot of information. As long as they're adding value through the presentation, it's worthwhile. I tried to find what 2 and 2 was through the report and I couldn't. So thank you for that. And a lot of the questions I had, you answered through your prezzo, so you saved yourself some questions out of a long set. So if you are adding value, I support it completely, just not verbatim reading of the report, that's all.
Just one quick question for you. As part of the partnerships, I'm wondering, most of my interactions in relation to road safety are around school zones. So I'm not quite sure why parents don't like them or why they feel that it's a challenge to them to not look at other children and think, how can I keep them safe? Would schools be part of that group that you would go to and actually liaise with on road safety strategies?
I think Department of Transport and Main Roads does liaise with schools on school safety. They're certainly, and they're a partner, they're part of the partnership. So I guess council officers, we have limited resources at the moment to be going out to all the schools and liaising with them, but particularly through crossing supervisors, the Department of Transport and Main Roads has direct communication lines with these schools and do send out information, particularly when the school crossing supervisors are having issues with driver behaviour around the schools. Our focus has been, in recent times, has been about the school zone pace car. It was one of the few original initiatives that we implemented when the strategy first came about. Well, actually, it may have been the second strategy. We've cut back on that because it's become, I guess, in some ways, people have become oblivious to things as they're used more and more, but there is still a need for doing that sort of drive awareness as well. And so in the strategy, you may see that we've highlighted the need to investigate continuing the school zone pace car program, but what form that takes, we've still got to review that to make best use of our resources. And so that may include liaising with the schools more differently than just driving a car around the school zones. So, yes.
Yeah, the PACE program car sounded like a great idea, and I know that on Polaris Avenue in particular in my area, that I think some people could benefit from having a visual of seeing a car there that's encouraging them to slow down with there's kids around. Do any other councillors have any other questions? Councillor Bradley.
Sorry, through the chair. Not really a question, just more of a statement. I was particularly keen to hear about the advisory groups coming up, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. There's a motion on the screen. If it's acceptable to councillors, Councillor Bradley's moving the motion. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Karansky. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That's been carried unanimously with everybody in the room. I'll now refer to item 4.4, which is a statement of intent for local roads 2022. And Mr. Ranawira, before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I refer to Mr. Ranawira, and I imagine you're going to have a lot of questions on this particular item, Mr. Ranawira, so save your breath for part of it.
Brought Bob as well to answer some of the questions.
G'day, Bob.
I take the report is read. I will outline summary. The report is the report is to establish a new statement of intent for local roads. The old one was done in 2015 and it's just about to expire. Local roads SOI is one of the 4 SOIs representing roads. Obviously the other 3 are payment rehabilitation, which is rehabilitating the new seals and rehabilitating the payments. Second one, we probably will bring a report up on that one as well soon. Second one is a major road capacity and safety program, which is now being looked at priority development area SHRIP program, as well as LGIP as well. So once all those things are settled down, we probably can look at reviewing that program as well. The third one is a major intersection upgrade program, which was done in 2020. We will review that again, but I think it is still current. So getting back to the local roads SOI, the current aim of the program is to widen narrow seal access roads to achieve minimum acceptable standard of 6 meter seal. That's the objective. To select candidate road projects, we have to remove or filter and remove major roads. So we don't have to consider major roads. That's not this. Unformed and unmade roads, gravel roads, unsealed roads, roads that have been built with curb and channeling because it's already done. Roads that has minimum seal width, we remove them as well. Short cul-de-sacs, they are not big priority, and so on. So we removed all of those things in our database. We came up with 111 candidate projects. Those 111 candidate projects, then we prioritize those projects applying a multi-criteria analysis. So the criteria has 4 elements. I think the link factor, which is if it is an important link, that road piece of road is important link connecting to a major arterial or collector or whatever, we consider high priority. Safety and amenity, the next one says if there are accidents or safety things, I think as per the standard drawings, we've considered that as well. Obviously, that's an obvious one. Payment condition factor, if the payment is deteriorating, we probably put it a high value as well. And the third, last one was the customer request factor. So if there is more complaints from customers, we consider them as high priority. So likewise, we prioritize 111 projects. We picked the first 31 projects and we believe those projects, to deliver those 31 projects probably will cost about 30 million. So the average spending per year is about 1 to 2 million. So this program has to be, I think, linked with other funding programs as well, like payment rehab. Sometimes we could do that. So those 31 projects are considered as a new statement of intent. That's our proposal. So that's where I'll leave it.
Thanks very much. We'll start off with Councillor Bannon.
How many roads for Division 9 in this list? A lot of these roads come up, we could probably follow the grass program. Is there something you have in the grass program? Because obviously grass, we widen the, I think it's just 2-coat seal on the edges, isn't it, for grass? So is there something happening in the grass program? Or is this a higher standard, like it's full asphalt when you come out?
As I understand, grass program actually widened the road as is.
No,
it doesn't construct new pavements, it doesn't take away the geometry impacts or whatever. So it's just like just widen.
Yeah, just
So
seals the shoulders. So this one's a higher standard than what grass is. It's a better job than what a grass program is.
Yes.
Yep. The how many roads on this? So on this list, you've got the list is just a 10. How many roads can you punch out on average a year? So if you're fully planned and ready to go, can 1, 2, and 3 go bang and they'll be done in 6 months, 12 months? And what's the turnaround for the roads?
As I said, there are 31 projects, cost 30 million. So every year we got about 2 million to spend. So
yeah, but every road costs different. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What's your average?
2 projects?
I think the question he's asking is how many projects are you intending to complete each year of this?
Yeah, what's the
Is that
average?
right, Councillor Bannon?
Yeah, what's his average on? Darryl?
And I guess talking to where I think Kamal was going, the roads are actually of differing lengths, and that makes it quite difficult for us. So to give a specific number, but certainly we've got 2 million annually, and we'd look to do that. We can give you some feedback if you like in regards to those top sections based on their lengths, but we need to do some analysis on that. Yeah.
So it takes a while to get that list done, obviously. Then,
if we look at the $2 million a year, and we've got 30 million total, we're looking at about 15 years for the list. Yes.
Yeah, so these little roads you've got there, roads like Stockley and Mullahagen Road, that don't come under this because they're more of a connector road?
They are major roads, I think.
Sorry, can we have either Mr. Ranawira or?
I think I'm hearing from Rob, and those roads are not in this. They are major roads. Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be another strip. That'd be another SOY to talk about with that road there.
Correct. So major roads are in the Major Roads Capacity and Safety SOI. They're considered there, if not in the SHRIP.
Yeah, so you consider Stockley, Mullerhagen a major road?
Correct.
Yeah, and Stockley Road at the back?
So there's a section of Stockley Road that is a local access road that's considered in this SOI.
That's the bypass road at the back where the chicken farm is that we just did up?
Correct.
Yeah.
Round the back. Yep.
So that bit of road that was done where the chicken farm is, that's what this
That was this
product will
program,
look like?
as well as grass. I believe grass contributed to part of
To
that
that as well.
section. Yep.
Cool. That's all.
Awesome. So we've got Councillor Jeremiah, Karansky, Bradley and Murphy.
Thank you,
And
Madam Chair. When I first heard about this item, I was a bit sceptical regarding the criteria, regarding the methodology. So I sat down with the RIP team and they walked me through their different ways of figuring out the list. They talked to me about the maths, they talked to me about the statistics, and it really cleared everything up in my mind. So I'd like to thank the RIP team for taking the time to explain this to me, and I really appreciate the effort that they put in to make it clear about how they end up at this list. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Karansky?
Thank you. Councillor Bannon actually asked a number of my questions, but I'll just go one step further and say, could councillors expect that this report's a precursor to a budget ask for the increase of funding toward these projects?
Money well spent. Oop.
It's a capital works item, so Darryl probably will be able to tell a bit more on that. It's related to the compass, I think. So.
Mr Acting Director?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this stage, there's not a service enhancement which has actually been written in regards to this report or the program. Certainly, there would be opportunity, I would expect, probably not in this year, but in future years, if Council wished to have a discussion in regards to the quantum of work that's on this program and whether there was some priority to do some additional work in that location. But at this stage, it's not on our radar at the moment. Obviously, we've only just compiled the current list and we're bringing that forward, and certainly the service enhancement works have been well progressed at this stage.
And just a comment, similar but different. I recall seeing a list similar to this several years ago regarding drainage and various other things in the local area, and we did exactly the same exercise where we worked out roughly how much money we had, we divided it back, how many years. I remember finding my projects on that list and thinking, okay, I've got a 4-year window, and at the next election when I looked into it, I still had a 4-year window. So I would suggest that you don't get too excited about getting this done anytime soon. If I'm in the top 3 and there's one for Division 4 in the top 3, I'm very excited that's likely to occur.
Thank you, Councillor Karansky. Councillor Bradley?
Thank you. The only one in Division 1 was 30 years away, so anyway. Can I just ask, just for clarification, when I first started in 2008, Ford Road was on our list for future widening. That still has never ever happened. Is that supposed to be in this list, or is that part of the major roads one?
Correct. I think Ford Road has always been considered as a major road, and
Right.
it'll be considered as part of that SOI.
Right, I look forward to seeing it on there, just saying.
Councillor Murphy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going the other way, guys. So the roads allocated in Division 12, Smith Road, Eagleby Road and Wharf Road that are mentioned in these reports will be affected and have some impacted availability by the Coomera Connector. So at current, those properties that are down on that road are mostly farming. It is flood affected in around that area as well. So I was just wondering why these particular roads in Division 12 have been highlighted. Yes, they're not incredibly wide. They do take some heavy machinery, like as in cane equipment, etc. But with the current thought process of the state government with the Coomera Connector, I just wondered why these particular roads have been highlighted.
So those particular roads, it's all data, driven by data that we have. We recognise that there is a Coomera connector coming through there with the corridor. The scope of the projects have not been determined at this stage. They will be determined as we run through the list in priority order. And of course, once we know more about Coomera connector, we can make decisions around what the scope for these particular roads will be. If they need to drop off, then they'll just be ignored and we move on to the next project because there are impacts from those major infrastructure projects.
Thank you for that. We're down the list somewhat anyway, so we've got a little bit of time on our hands. So I just wanted to highlight those and being not hugely impacting of our residents. So I just wanted to highlight those 3 roads and maybe we can save some money for somewhere else.
Thanks very much. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check. I've got Kalina Road and it's priority number 2. Now, Kalina Road regularly floods. So I just wanted to make sure with the widening and that sort of thing, it won't be making this any worse, especially for those residents, and it's just in one low-lying section.
So with any roadworks, we don't want to worsen any flood impacts. As I say, the actual scope of all the projects are yet to be determined. So the costing to allow us to do the prioritisation is a nominal rate. But yeah, when we get to the scoping, we'll recognise all those things and ensure that there are no adverse impacts.
Because I just want to make sure that those residents that are on the other side of where it floods can actually still get out, and it's not going to then cause issues down the road and that sort of thing. But thanks.
Thanks very much. If there's no other councillors wishing to speak, there is a motion on the board. I have a move for the motion. Councillor Brannan, seconded by Mayor Power. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's been carried unanimously with everybody present. Now, that marks the end of the Road Infrastructure Planning Manager's reports. Pardon? Oh, Councillor Hall, pardon me.
Sorry, through the chair. Look, while I was reading this report, I noticed that there's so many rear ends reported. I think people probably need to be reminded to save a couple of car spaces between you and the driver in front of you. That's how you stop rear-ending, is when you drive too close to the rear end of a car. I think that knowledge needs to get put out there and said more often, because I find quite often while you're driving down the street, someone's right up the bottom of you. Thank you.
That's an absolutely fantastic idea. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Councillor Hall. You did vote in the affirmative on the local roads. Yep. Okay. Now we're on to, that marks the end of the road infrastructure planning. I know that Councillor Wilcox has some general business. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. When I was reading the very first report, it triggered something for me to do with Bushman Drive. Bushman Drive was due for an upgrade in the last quarter of last year. We're nearly at the end of the first quarter of this year, and I'm still waiting, and residents are patiently waiting. So just wondering if you have any update on when that will be happening.
Is that you, Mr. Ranawira, or is that Acting Director?
I'm thinking that you're talking about a rehab program. So I need to go and check where the project is at, and I can get back to you.
That would be great, because it was pretty much destroyed in the floods and it's now littered with potholes. So thank you.
So, Mr. Ranawira, you're going to have that back to Councillor Wilcox by as soon as possible. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any general business for Mr. Ranawira? Thank you very much for your time today. I'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much. So I'll now refer to item 5.1. Can the Group Manager of Logan Water, Mr. Mike Basterfield, please enter the discussions? Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to Mr. Basterfield to open public discussion. You may proceed, Mr. Basterfield.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. And through the Chair, I've got a short presentation with a few slides just to explain the progress with the Springwood Low Reservoir. So if we just flip through to the next one. So Springwood Low is a central part of the northern water supply area for Logan. You'll see up there that there are two reservoirs. Reservoir 1 was built earlier than Reservoir 2, 35 and 30 megalitres respectively. We need about 24 megalitres out of this facility to guarantee our water supply for the city. There is some interest as well from SEQ Water in that this reservoir provides some good routing functions for SEQ Water in certain water supply situations. So important for us to keep both of these reservoirs available for service, but we only need one of them actively in service at any one time. So we've had a program of reservoir upgrades running through the city, and this reservoir was reasonably important, so it was high on the list, but there was some talk of SEQ Water purchasing this asset from us. So our want to spend money on it slipped down the list a little. In the last 6 months, it's become obvious that they want us to retain this facility, but it's low on their list of priorities to purchase that. So what we've decided to do is that one of the reservoirs needs to be maintained and kept online, and the other ready to use and in its acceptable state maintenance-wise. So we had two projects. The first project, we chose Reservoir 2 to work on, and for that to be the active reservoir on the right-hand side of that photo. The reason for that, it being the younger one, it had the best long-term capacity for the city. The work that we had to do was separated into two projects, the first being that the reservoir seals needed upgrade. So we had to upgrade the seals, remove some redundant piping, and then the second project was to add ventilation to the reservoir. So we need to comply with our drinking water requirements and plan, and water quality plan, as well as the specifications on our reservoirs. So they were two separate bodies of work. We proceeded with to look at the first body of work in the middle of the year last year. As we moved through the reservoir sealing, it became obvious that that was going to take a little longer than we thought. So we brought the second part of the work forward and did all of the work together. Now, the other part of this reservoir that is probably the point of most discussion is that it's had a long-term community use as a flat concrete space with access for families. My neighbours in Coorparoo have used this when they were kids, so it's been a long-standing facility for the city. What we found, though, is that as part of upgrading reservoirs now in sort of the place that we find ourselves, that precluding access to the top of our reservoirs is necessary, and that's so that we can guarantee the water quality for the city. So as we worked through, we closed all of the reservoir surface from public access as we did the work, and that was from a workplace health and safety point of view. And being cognizant of the community use, that there was a real want to reopen this facility for that use. From a consultation point of view, we have followed our normal process. I'll probably just flip through the slides. You'll see on the bottom that the bottom right hand of that photo, you'll see that there's some vents that have been added. You'll see the fencing that has been closing off about 45% of the reservoir area. Now, that's necessary so that we comply with our specifications and we can ensure that we comply with our drinking water guidelines. There's a view there from the road. You can see the fence in the distance, and then the public space that is now available. As we moved through this, we consulted, through the committee chair and the divisional councillor, and with advice to local residents, that we needed to close off the reservoir for a period of work. That was in May of last year. In August, we then advised a similar group that we would be keeping the reservoir closed to do the second body of work. As we moved through towards Christmas, we prepared another communication to the same stakeholder group, and that's where we dropped the ball. So that communication wasn't issued to the stakeholder group, and that's the area of improvement that we clearly need to address. After Christmas, and that was to advise that it was necessary to close this area of the reservoir surface and maintain the reservoir 1 area for public access. After Christmas, the contractor finished the work and removed the barriers that were stopping access to the whole facility, and that was before we had notified our stakeholder group. Once we were aware that that had happened, we then issued a third communication advising that there was a permanent closure, and the reasons for that closure being water quality and protecting water quality, and that the space on Reservoir 1 was now available again for public use. Now going forward, we need to maintain the space of Reservoir 1. We haven't currently completed the work in Reservoir 2, the one that will come back online. We found that when we water tested that there were some cold joints in the old concrete structure around one of the support columns. So we're addressing that leak now, and then we will retest and bring the reservoir back online. So then Reservoir 1 will be, we won't have to close any of the space while we do that work because we now have the access restrictions that we have in place. Reservoir 1 has, we will then look at when we can get access to the underside of the reservoir roof. We will inspect that again. We've been doing that regularly so that we can ensure that that reservoir surface is safe for public access, continues to be safe for public access, because there's no question of that. After we had advised our stakeholder groups that the reservoir would again be open, we've been monitoring social media traffic, and we have received some comments back about and noted some requests from residents that the facility could be upgraded a little bit. So now as we go into the maintenance activity on the Reservoir 1 roof, we'll take account of those requests as we move to finalise the work on the facility. Now, I think that the key thing for us is that we dropped the ball before Christmas in advising everyone that we had to now permanently close 45% of the facility. That was our decision, and we didn't advise people as we could have. But we spent a lot of time, particularly in the last year, trying to realign our service. And for instance, we now will open in the New York Street building an integrated service hub that will combine all of our activities in this area. So our customer service, the calls that we get from the public, how we issue work out to our crews will all be coordinated in one space. So I think we can look forward to an improvement in that area. In fact, I'll guarantee that we'll have an improvement in that area. So I think we flip through to the last slide. The next slide, you'll see that on the right-hand side there's a render. They're the 3 notices that I talked about. We definitely should have had a notice between number 2 and number 3 on that slide. And you'll see the facility that we've got. That's the architect's render. We're about to start fitting out that floor to provide that facility. So in summary, I think we will now move to finish the maintenance work on Reservoir 1. We'll look at the additions that have been brought up, and we'll look to close the issue. So that's thanks for the opportunity to present that. That's our report today.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Bradley, you're first up.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Mr. Basterfield. Have we ever spoken about this subject, or have you ever presented this report to me, even spoken to me about it by any chance?
I recall that we had one meeting very early on about before the work started, not long after I'd arrived at council.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that was just to discuss that we needed to close the reservoir for that maintenance work. And the contents of this report have been issued as requested by council.
That's correct. On the 18th of May last year, notes were taken of a meeting that was held, and it was discussed in that meeting that any closure of this reservoir would not go down well with the community. That's in the minutes. ELT suggested looking at alternative community amenities if the site was permanently closed. That's what was discussed with me, that the site would be permanently closed. And I wanted to be transparent with the community and with a report to council. And this is so that the community can be assured that this whole process was transparent, because it's a very popular facility for families. And I actually asked for recommendations for a report, and I was assured that a report would come. That report never came. Then further meetings were held with David Radich and the Parks Manager about possible acquisition of a property, and I'm going to ask for a separate in GB for this particular recommendation to go up. Separate to this particular property that I'm referring to, and I can't actually disclose where exactly. Last term I had actually asked if it could go into the LGIP for future parks acquisition. So that was separate to this particular subject coming up. And the reason for that was, one, it makes logical sense. It's right next to Underwood Park, and Underwood Park is one of our busiest parks in the city. And two, the actual owner actually said that they were told by council many years ago that council was going to buy their property. So I'm going to ask for that in GB. And I've spoken to a number of councillors about this. There's some councillors I haven't actually spoken to about it, but it's just a GB report. That's all that's being asked for. I was also following this, following that meeting in May, also the administration manager actually got a valuation for the acquisition of that property. So going forward with community consultation going forward, so the public were not aware of this closure. I was not aware of this closure. I find that very, very disrespectful of our community. Our values for our city, what are our values? Community first, our people, excellence, leadership, integrity. Our values are what steer our behaviour. They are what steer our objectives as a council. Those values were not adhered to here. I've actually, this is 14 years today that I was first elected. This would have to be the most disrespectful thing I've ever had happen. The community that I represent have been deceived here. In my opinion, this is the most deceptive thing. Go close it without a report, without being transparent. And then being told by the council officer that told me, oh, councillors can't get involved in operational issues. Far out, I said right back from the start, this is a big issue. No, you need to feel those emotions.
Councillor Kerrans. Mr. Bassfield, would you like to respond? Or shall I continue with questions or?
I mean, we clearly should have engaged further with our stakeholder group at the end of last year when that decision needed to be made. We've taken that on board. We are looking at the way that we manage issues and the way that we look at the metrics of how we respond and to make sure that these things don't happen. So we're going to a great deal of trouble and effort to make sure that we do respond and that we do keep people informed. So, and it's certainly not our intention to cause distress.
Councillor Kerensky.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. May I ask who the members of the stakeholder group are?
So when we have work like this, we'll look at what the affected resident group will be. So it was a selected group of residents around the facility, and we engaged with the divisional councillor and the committee chair. So that's pretty much how we would do that.
And I think you went through the timeline so that I could understand, but just at this current point in time, has the public got, did you say 55% access?
Yes.
And that they'll retain, all going well, they'll retain that 55% access? What kind of activities are the public doing on the reservoir?
I saw some, we've been monitoring social media, and typically it's young children learning to ride bikes and skateboarding and those sorts of activities where a large concrete surface is beneficial. So yeah, those sorts of activities.
And those activities could continue. Is it possible that there could be some offset for this site? For example, is there something we could build adjacent to the site that may act as some sort of an offset for them losing that additional space?
We had some suggestions that we saw on the social media responses. On the roof of the reservoir, there's been some painted lines to guide kids riding bikes. So we're looking at the feasibility of repainting those. Also, there was some suggestions about some seating, water bubblers, that sort of facility. We can't add anything to the roof that adds a structural load, but so it needs to be reasonably low key. But we're going to investigate that as we look to do maintenance work on that reservoir one roof. So that needs to now be scoped and delivered.
And just in terms of council assets, this rests obviously not with parks or anything like that. This asset rests with you guys, so you guys would be responsible for any additional embellishments or what have you on the site?
We're taking that approach, yep. So it's very similar, I would say, to the way that we landscape pump stations in the wider city.
Yeah.
So it's to do whatever we can about the amenity of these facilities that are water assets. So
I'd certainly be supportive of seeing some embellishments on the balance of the site in conjunction with the divisional councillor and the community to make most of the space we have remaining for them.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks very much. I heard Councillor Bradley raise a hand again. Councillor Bradley, you have further questions?
Yeah, thank you. I won't keep you much longer. So I used to be very proud of this. Sorry. So whenever I take anyone on tour of Division 1, I'd stop at this place and say, this is the best $5,000 ever spent. Paint. I think it's really, I want to ask a question. Initially Southeast Queensland Water were interested in buying this site. That's a possibility still, isn't it?
it is still a possibility.
Okay, I think it's really, in my opinion, I think it's ridiculous going down the road of possible embellishments and whatever. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So I'm going to park that, and can I just say, never ever has Logan Water actually funded anything on that particular reservoir. It has always come out of divisional funding. So it took me 2 years to get that paint on that reservoir.
2 years of negotiations and you know, getting agreements and anyway, I won't go any further, but I'll be asking for a GB item, that's all.
Thanks very much. I do have a question, which is if SEQ Water were to buy this asset, would there be any compensatory thing for the community out of the sale of the asset? And would they allow local residents on top of their assets?
Our view in discussions is that it would be unlikely because there's no other access to the top of a reservoir in SEQ's assets, but that's something that would have to be discussed with them. But our view right from the start was that if that happened, that it would be likely that access would be stopped. Yeah.
Thanks. And it was determined that Reservoir 1 was unsafe for people to continue to be on the roof of it. Is that correct?
There's one crack in Reservoir 1 that's been treated. So we have you'll see that across the gate you can't drive a vehicle on there. So in driving vehicles on there to do the work on Reservoir 2, we did a structural analysis and marked out where we could drive. So it's safe for public access, and we will again inspect it in the coming month. And if we have to do any work to keep that roof safe, we will. But it's not anticipated we have any substantial work to do on it.
So Reservoir 1 is not, Reservoir 2 is?
So Reservoir 1 is the first one that's now open.
I understand.
Reservoir 2 closed off. Both reservoir roofs are safe for foot traffic. Yeah.
Okay. I don't understand why we're having this argument then. If they're both safe,
They're both safe. Yeah.
why are we closing them?
Oh no, Reservoir 2 is closed for
Maintenance.
Operational reasons. So we have to, all of our reservoir roofs with our reservoir spec and our drinking water management plan don't have any public access. So we've just installed a whole series of 9 new vents to keep the condition of the reservoir and the water at premium condition. So now with those vents and the rejuvenated seals, public access is not something that we can have operational.
So it's water security.
It's water security is the reason that.
Thank you. That's the point I was trying to get to, which is you're closing it for water security,
Yes.
not because the site is unsafe or because
Absolutely.
we're selling it or any other reason. It's
No.
purely for the preservation and security of water.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Hall.
Look, hearing all this, I understand that people were using the reservoir we were allowed to use the reservoir and have access to it for other reasons as to why it was originally built. It was originally built for the holding of the water.
Yes.
And that is why it was made. Now, it was opened up to allow people to have access and do extra activities on there, but those extra activities were never the intention of this reservoir being built. The reservoir is now being utilised as to its original intention. And I believe in the current climate that we're in, water is one of the most important things that this city can have. And we should doing everything we can to make sure that that water is safe and clean. That is all.
Thanks very much. No other councillors have any questions? There is a motion on the board. Can I have a mover for the motion, please? That would be Councillor Hall. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? To receive the report. Councillor Karansky is seconding it. All those, please raise your hand if you're in support of the motion. That's carried unanimously with everybody present in the room. That marks the end of the Group Manager of Logan Water's reports. Councillor Brad, do you have some general business?
Correct. There should be a GB item on the board. I have spoken to a number of councillors about this, and as stated, I raised this last term separate to this issue that we've just discussed. And hence why I'm raising it now, because it's also a possibility if this is closed down the track, the reservoir, which all
indications when I was first spoken about it last year, that is definitely the intention down the track, is to close it to the public. And I understand that is the intent of water reservoirs. However, that was not the intent of why I asked the report. The intent of asking for the report was to be transparent, which is what I said back in May last year, to be transparent to the community about what is going on. That was the intention from the officers, to close the facility. And I said we had to be transparent.
Sorry.
Anyway, all I'm asking for is a report. It doesn't mean you are actually saying you support whatever the outcome is. It's just asking for a report.
Thanks. Do we have the capacity to ask for a report in a different committee?
The cross-referencing from one
Yes.
committee to another.
I don't know that we have the authority to ask for that
We
report.
can. We've done it before.
From one committee to another. Councillor Karansky, you're Chair of Lifestyle.
I didn't know this was, I haven't had any communication with Councillor Bradley regarding this report, so request for a report. My concern is, where's the funding coming from? We're talking about an asset that's sitting on top of a non-parks asset, so the request is really to fund this via parks, I would presume, and all of you have parks that you have in a hierarchy in the city that you're hoping will come off. So I'd rather have managers and so on here that we could ask questions of, because I'd be worried that endorsing this would have the impact of pushing back some of those other projects, unless our wonderful friends at Roads and Water are going to stump up the funding for this. So I have concerns about this without being consulted or having any parks managers and so on in the room to answer any questions.
So, in order, Acting Director Riley and Councillor Bradley.
In regards to the recommendation which is on the board, I did take the opportunity yesterday to have a discussion with the Parks Manager around the parcel of land in question. So the parcel of land is not tied with the reservoir. It's actually in Rochedale South. It's a unique block with some specific detail to it. The proposal which I have discussed with him was around bringing a report outlining the detail of that property and then what funding implications may be around that in the longer term. Certainly the resolution was not to apply funding to that, not to put it on a priority or give it a priority over any other property. It was to bring back a report around the detail of that property for council's information.
So again, my question, sorry, Councillor Bradley, my question is why is this being moved in roads if it's not linked to the report that we previously discussed? Why hasn't it come up in lifestyle? But I'll go to Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, and my apologies, Councillor Karansky, I didn't get time to talk to you. I spoke to a number of councillors before the meeting, but I had the Parks Manager actually met with me last year and Mr. Riley about this subject, and also David Radich, because there was discussion about possibly LGIP as well, because I raised this particular property last term to be considered for parks acquisition as part of LGIP. So that's why that meeting actually happened, just to flag this as a possibility because of what I was told, that it would be closed.
I've just had something put in front of me, but my gut says that we should actually ask that this be referred to the City Lifestyle Committee for tomorrow for consideration rather than us requesting a report be prepared. Are you acceptable to that?
Happy with that.
Lovely. So Councillor Bradley's, can we just adjust that motion, please?
Do we just want to move the GB item over to City Lifestyle?
That's correct.
Reconsider it there?
Yes. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to clarify, Councillor Bradley, you're bringing this report forward through the Lifestyle Committee so that you can have a report already presented and available for the purchase of land in Underwood, but this is also just linked with the reservoir as well, in case Logan Water do sell it to SEQ Waters, and that's where the funding is coming from. Is that the understanding, or we're just doing this completely separately?
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Just to elaborate, I raised this last term separate to this subject today, right? Separate. Because, like I said, the resident was told many years ago that council was going to buy their land. It makes logical sense that it's included in Underwood Park. In the time that I have been a councillor, Mr Mayor has organised a particular park to be bought. It came out of divisional funding, and that might be what it comes out from a report like this. Who knows? But it has been valued. I know how much it is. It makes logical sense that it goes into the park. And if the reservoir is closed, to me that would definitely compensate the community as well. So it's a double.
But this report that you're asking for the Underwood land is completely separate and should go through LISA.
Elaborate, it's not in Underwood, not in the suburb of Underwood.
But near Underwood Park.
Yes, it's near Underwood.
But it's completely separate to anything else?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Karansky.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy actually went a long way to where I was going. I just had one step further. So in other words, effectively you're asking that the council consider compensating your residents for the loss of the potential use of the reservoir by half the reservoir by acquiring land. Is that the ask?
Like I said, I asked for this last
No,
term
Councillor Bradley, it's just, have I got that right?
No, you have not got it right.
Because that's what I'm hearing.
Because, no, listen to me, please. I'll explain it again. I asked for it last term. The resident told me that the council was going to buy their land.
But I don't understand the relevance, why that's coming up here at this point in time, because we've
Just using your speaker, please.
My confusion is we've just got through a report about the roof of the reservoir, and then you've called for a report on the basis of that report. So,
okay,
if I'm going to chair this tomorrow, I need to understand what it is the ask here, because I don't get it.
Can I please go back a step, please, and explain it in very simplistic terminology? I asked for this last term. You were here last term. You may not remember it, but I did definitely ask for it last term because it makes logical sense that this parcel of land goes in Underwood Park. I am not asking for Logan Water to purchase it. I'd already had a discussion with David Radich before I had that meeting in May about this parcel of land near Underwood Park. And when the subject came up of Springwood Reservoir possibly being closed permanently, which was what I was told on the 18th of May last year, I said, well, maybe that is a possibility to compensate the community. So that's when it was explored. Not necessarily, because I still would like a report regardless. Because it's twofold.
I think you've explained it. Councillor Wilcox.
I'm just I don't know if I'm confused or whatever with the wording with the potential funding options for the targeted augmentation of Underwood Park. So I'm hearing that it's two separate items, but that augmentation to me is just...
Okay, my understanding is that as a trigger for today's meeting, the report that was previously done on the Springwood Reservoir has had Councillor Bradley have conversations with the acting director in relation to a motion as a result of the potential loss or partial loss of area for her community, and she asked that a motion be put up in this committee. While I don't understand that it should come through the committee, there's a motion on the board that asks for this specific motion to be referred to the City Lifestyle Committee tomorrow. I'll bring it up tomorrow. You sure? Okay. Because I was just going to put the motion to them as worded in the thing. Okay, we'll let.
I'll have discussions with others between now and then about.
You'll have discussions with others between now and then. Yep. Okay, that's no worries. Does anyone else have any general business for Mr. Basterfield? And noting that social distancing isn't a thing anymore, does anyone have any questions for the Acting Director? Councillor Raven.
My question isn't for the acting director, it's for the manager of RCM who isn't here today from what I can tell. So on the 4th of March, I was contacted by a resident who'd had flood impacts from a piece of council-owned land. I wrote to, I think, 2 managers requesting confirmation of who owns it. Michael Asnikar responded within minutes. I haven't heard anything from Stephen Ball. There's been a follow-up from Bell, my bad. Just trying to make the director nervous. I haven't heard anything from Stephen Bell, not an acknowledgement. I know it's not up to the 10 business days of the ARGs yet, but the resident has written to me 3 times since because they're concerned that if we get more heavy rain, they'll get more flash flooding caused by the poor maintenance of this particular detention basin. So if I could get a response to that urgent request, that would be appreciated, as well as an explanation for why it didn't get acknowledged. I know everybody's busy with floods, but waste is just as busy as RCM is at the moment. We're all getting flogged.
Mr. Acting Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will certainly follow that up with the manager, and I'll come back to you. I will come and see you after the meeting just to get the location of the device as well.
Councillor Bradley.
I've got a very similar one. I was going to just raise it with the acting director, but I emailed the same person in January, and I emailed again, and the particular item still hasn't been resolved.
Mr. Acting Director.
I'll follow up on that as well and come back to you. Okay.
Thanks very much. Mine's the last one. Last year, a full overhaul of Woodridge State School car park was undertaken. Disability access points were improved. Disability car parks, it was all relined. There was some landscaping works, but one of the most important parts of that was a rubble pit to take the water from the car park under a pathway and into the school so that it could disperse. My understanding is that Education Queensland rejected that idea for a rubble pit and wanted us to instead expend about $30,000 plus on running a pipe through their school and having it discharged way further down rather than running through their added on teachers car park. Now, as water happened, there was a build-up of sediment and a build-up of moss, and it was raised that we needed to gurney one of the walkways, and subsequently a resident did slip on that walkway. Now, that resident is a bit uncomfortable at the moment, and they're working their way through it. But I'm just wondering whether or not you could ask if a letter could be written to Education Queensland outlining the impact of their poor decision when it comes to that rubble pit and the benefits to the local community and the safety to the local community, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, certainly there was work undertaken by Council to try and resolve that issue, and the school didn't agree, I guess, to be part of that solution. So
it's actually Education Queensland infrastructure, not the school.
Yep. We can certainly write to them and highlight that there's been further things that occur in that location and ask them to reconsider their position. Yep.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors have any other general business for the Director? That being said, thank you very much, Mr. Basterfield, for your report today. I declare the meeting of the Infrastructure Committee closed at 12:32 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. And the City Planning and Economic Development Committee will resume in 10 minutes, that being at 12:42 p.m.